Number 10. A live missile. Nothing is quite as dangerous as a live missile. A French S-530 air-to-air missile was recently discovered at the Lakeland Linder National Airport. Apparently, the missile had been part of a shipment en route to be delivered to a nearby defense contractor known as Draken International, a company that operates a fleet of around 150 ex-military fighter jets. While evaluating the shipment, the team at the airport discovered an object that was clearly very explosive. It created a huge panic, with part of the airport being evacuated for about 4 hours while the missile was relocated by professionals with the 6th Civil Engineer Squadron Explosive Ordnance Disposal. The Lakeland Fire Department and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives also helped remove the explosive as well. It's not clear how exactly the missile ended up being inside the shipment, but it was quickly relocated to a munitions storage facility, where it was to be held until it could properly be disposed of. Normally, when authorities find live bombs, the bomb squad will take them out to a secure location and detonate them. But in this case, the missile was so big and so powerful that it couldn't be disposed of like normal. The government acted swiftly to take care of the situation, and since the missile was contained, there have been no reports about what happened to it. However, everyone at the Lakeland Airport is sure lucky that the thing didn't go off by accident. Number 9. Blubber blast. A blue whale was recently found rotting away on a beach in Canada, and it turned out to be a ticking time bomb. The whale washed up in Newfoundland after being frozen in the coastal ice throughout the winter, becoming beached on the shore in a small town of Trout River. And yes, it became a whale of a problem. The blue whale was 81 feet long and definitely dead, and it had all the residents of this small town, which by the way, only has a population of around 650 people, worried that it would explode and cause some serious damage. According to Doris Shepard, the owner of a small bed and breakfast in the town, the whale was quickly filling with toxic gases and becoming a health hazard. It was about 45 degrees out at the time, which luckily managed to slow the decomposition. But as the weather became warmer and warmer, the stink began to make the beach unbearable, and anyone who went near the carcass was in danger of having it explode and shower them in whale guts. Fortunately, the whale didn't end up exploding, and nature eventually did its thing and got rid of the whale carcass without any casualties. But still, this was a very close call for the small town of Trout River and its worried residents. Number 8. Snake in the playground. Even more horrifying than a potential whale bomb is the huge and highly venomous snake that was recently found hiding near a playground, only about 16 feet away from children playing. So where do you think something like this could happen? In a place known to have a plethora of wild animals, of course, Australia. It went down in the small town of Beerwah in Queensland, when concerned residents witnessed a massive eastern brown snake slithering around near where the local children like to hang out and play. In this case, professionals with the Sunshine Coast snake catchers were called in to deal with the dangerous situation, and they expertly caught and disposed of the snake. But even though the big, sneaky serpent was taken care of and nobody died, this was a very close call and a horrifying and threatening discovery. According to Live Science, eastern brown snakes are the second most toxic serpent on the entire planet. If a curious child had gotten too close to the snake and it lashed out, this would have been a major tragedy for the community. To make matters even worse and more frightening, these types of highly venomous snakes are quite common in the area. The only major difference this time was that the snakes may have been eyeing the local kids as potential snacks. So have you ever witnessed a snake where it shouldn't have been? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to give this video a like and hit that subscribe button for more videos like this one. Number 7. Discovery in Deadly Cave. An absolutely bizarre discovery has just been made inside of a deadly cave in one of Colorado's iconic ski resort towns, Steamboat Springs. The cave is known as Sulphur Cave, and it's unlike any other subterranean nightmare in the entire country. It's nestled at the foot of a small ski hill near Steamboat Springs, about 25 feet deep and roughly 200 feet long. The cave is so narrow that there's barely enough room for a full-grown man to stand. Despite its beautiful and delicate tubular crystals, it's still got to be one of the spookiest places in the entire state, and it is completely off-limits to enter. No one is allowed to enter the cave because it's actually quite dangerous. This cave is pretty deadly. There are extremely high levels of toxic gases within the cave system that cause a person to pass out and die in just a few minutes. You can even smell the toxic gases wafting out if you stand near the entrance of the cave. A few deep breaths are all it takes to knock a man out. But here's where the creepy discovery part comes in. Researchers using specialized breathing apparatuses went into the cave to see what they could find. They discovered bloodworms thriving inside the cold and damp recesses of the cave. These blood-colored worms live in huge clusters and can be found writhing together like a nest of gross red snakes. According to Steinman, who had been studying the cave for more than 20 years, this species of worm is only known to exist in Steamboat Springs. But aside from these terrifying clusters of worms, Sulphur Cave is also home to spiders, millipedes, and other creepy crawlies that you don't ever want to meet. Number 6. Spiders in bananas. 2 shoppers in the United Kingdom made the most horrifying discovery of their lives after simply trying to buy some bananas. The 2 shoppers, during 2 separate incidents, allegedly found the world's deadliest spider inside a bunch of bananas they had purchased from their local grocery store. To make matters worse, these 2 separate victims had been shopping at the same supermarket. The bananas had apparently come from Costa Rica, and inside the bananas were Brazilian wandering spiders and eggs. This is the most dangerous spider in the entire world, with venom so toxic that one bite will kill a human in 2 short hours. These spiders are famous for hiding inside of bananas. And when bananas get shipped to places like the United Kingdom or the United States from Central America, sometimes a devious spider hatches a ride. According to Jeff Greenwood, one of the unfortunate victims who found the spiders in his bananas, he first noticed the arachnid while unpacking his groceries in the kitchen. The spider itself appeared to have been squished between the bags, and while this may not be the grocery store's fault, it kind of is. They should probably check their produce better. Nobody was injured this time, but in the future, someone pulling bananas out of their grocery bags could wind up with a rather nasty bite. Number 5. Dangerous frozen methane. An international team of scientists working on a Russian research vessel have just discovered a very dangerous deposit of frozen methane in the Arctic Ocean. According to the International Siberian Shelf Study, they discovered that frozen methane deposits have been dispersing over a huge area of Siberia. And the danger of this is that the methane could create a deadly new climate feedback loop that has the possibility to dramatically change global climate as we know it. These deposits are known in the scientific circles as the sleeping giants of the carbon cycle. These frozen methane hydrates have been found at about 1,100 feet deep beneath the continental shelf. Already the gas is beginning to vent into the atmosphere. So let me just quickly explain why this is such a dangerous discovery. Methane gas has a heating effect roughly 80 times more powerful than CO2 over the course of 20 years. This means that as the methane, which has been trapped under the ice for thousands of years, begins to leak out into the atmosphere because of the melting ice, the Earth is heated at an exponential level. And while we won't see the effects of this immediately, this discovery shows that the process has already started, and now it's just a matter of time. Number 4. Dangerous blue dragons. In a rather peculiar discovery, blue dragons have just been spotted in Texas. And of course, these aren't dragons like from Game of Thrones. They're actually known scientifically as blue glaucus, and they were discovered at Padre Island National Seashore by a Texas family. At first glance, they look like vivid blue sea dragons, only about the size of your thumb. However, the blue dragon is an insanely dangerous and very rare animal that has absolutely no business being on a Texas beach. This tiny animal has a sting that can be more painful than the infamous man-o-war jellyfish. If you were to accidentally step on a blue dragon, which by the way is a type of sea slug, you would end up with immense pain and a trip to the hospital, and a trip that could be your last. Luckily for the Texans who found 4 of these creatures on the beach, they knew better than to touch them, so nobody was injured. But next time the blue dragons show up, unsuspecting beachgoers might not be so lucky. Number 3. World War II explosive. Workers at a building site near the University of Exeter in the United Kingdom stumbled upon an old World War II explosive device, prompting a swift evacuation of thousands of people in the local community. Hundreds of students from the university had to be evacuated, as well as the residents of around 2,600 properties. This is because the bomb was live and deadly when the construction workers found it. According to Inspector Sean Roper with the Devon and Cornwall Police, extreme measures had to be taken because the bomb was so huge. He told local news that the bomb was over 8 feet in length. Considering the bomb came from World War II, it had probably been sitting in the dirt ever since without being touched. That made it extremely dangerous and volatile, and the authorities had to take great care as they moved the bomb to a secure area where nobody would be harmed. And then they blew it up. After the explosion shook the neighborhood, everyone was allowed to return to their homes. Number 2. Venomous trees. Scientists have discovered a unique type of stinging tree in Australia that secretes venom quite similar to scorpion venom. As if Australia wasn't scary enough with its sharks and spiders and snakes, now you have to be careful of the trees, too. Scientists working with the University of Queensland have studied the gimpy tree and found that the needle-like hairs all over its body are able to inject human beings with poisonous substances and dangerous chemicals similar to those found in the venom of scorpions, spiders, and even deadly cone snails. But here's where things get really weird with this tree. The scientists discovered that it delivers a whole new class of neurotoxin never before seen, and they're naming the toxins gimpytides. These toxins are what make the trees truly venomous, causing long-lasting pain and extreme discomfort in anyone who comes into contact with it. Number 1. Dangerous chocolate discovery. The last thing anyone wants to find while eating a chocolate bar is a dangerous chunk of hard plastic. But that's exactly what happened to a woman after she nearly snapped her tooth in half while eating a bar of Cole's chocolate that she picked up from her local supermarket. Apparently, large pieces of plastic are being lost inside of chocolate bars somewhere in the assembly line. It's not clear how exactly this happened or how it passed quality control, but it seems like nobody is safe anymore, even when they just want to have a snack. This woman's identity was never revealed, and it's not clear if she won a settlement for her close call. But the next time you bite into a Belgian dark chocolate roasted almond bar, you'd better be careful you don't choke on a hunk of plastic or break the teeth in your mouth. According to recent archaeological evidence, it seems that a volcanic eruption all the way in Alaska may have spelled the end of the Roman Republic. And while you might think that Rome collapsed because it stretched itself too thin, and the Visigoths struck at the heart of the empire and the entire thing fell apart, it might actually be a little more complicated than that. The Okmok volcano in Alaska erupted in the year 43 BC. It erupted with such intense power that it spat ash into the atmosphere and blocked out the light of the sun. This resulted in 2 of the coldest years in over 2 millennia. According to a new study published in the scientific journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, researchers are saying that these 2 very cold years triggered a famine that worsened the already damaged political situation in Rome and ultimately led to the fall of the empire. But of course, scientists don't really know for sure. It could have been a coincidence, or it could have been the beginning of the end. And this new revelation also beckons the question of what could happen in our modern society if a volcano erupted now, blocking out the sun. Number 9. Three-Whale Rock. Three-Whale Rock is one of the strangest and most misunderstood natural splendors in the world. This geological formation is located in Thailand, and it's about 75 million years old. In Thai, it's known as Hin Sam Wan, and it earned this name because it really does look like a family of 3 whales sailing through the lush forest. Of course, this is only if you have an aerial view of the place. Otherwise, it looks like just very smooth rocks. The only way to reach this place is by an extensive network of trails, and it's definitely one of the less visited tourist attractions in Thailand. The mystery here is how the rocks formed, considering that they're an anomaly in a landscape that's primarily forest. The existence of the 3-whale rocks has captivated the minds of the locals for centuries. And while there aren't any theories of extraterrestrials or otherworldly encounters here to speak of, it's still a fascinating formation and another mysterious location in the ancient kingdom of Thailand. Number 8. The Starving of SAQQARA. The Starving of SAQQARA are limestone figure statues that no one has been able to identify. For the last few decades, scientists and historians have been debating whether the limestone figures are genuine or fake. It began in 1999 when the University of Concordia in Montreal acquired the Starving of SAQQARA as part of an exhibition of Egyptian artifacts. But after the exhibition, the Starving of SAQQARA never left. To make matters more confusing, nobody really knew or knows where the statues came from. Antiquities often got lost in the 1800s and 1900s, moving between museums and private collections, with many amazing artifacts losing authenticity, and even the story of where they came from. The reason these limestone figures are so mysterious is that they had elongated skulls like aliens, slack mouths, and unnaturally thin limbs. The statues are squatting and naked, facing each other with each one resting a hand on the arm of the other. Plus, there is graffiti carved into the base of the statue that's written in a language that has yet to be deciphered. Many people claim that these statues represent extraterrestrial visitors to ancient Egypt, and the reason they haven't been properly studied is because the government wants to cover it up. However, some people, like Clarence Epstein, the director of special projects and cultural affairs at Concordia University, believes that the statue simply has Nubian origins, which would explain the difference in physical features, as the Nubians may have been interpreted as having larger heads and skinnier limbs. So who do you think these statues were? Let me know in the comments below, and then don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for more amazing videos like this one. Number 7. Mysterious bodies. Archaeologists were absolutely floored when they discovered 2 unknown bodies buried beneath an ancient tavern at the archaeological site of Hadrian's Wall in the United Kingdom. Of course, Hadrian's Wall is one of the most famous structures left behind by the ancient Roman Empire when they conquered Britain about 2,000 years ago. The wall is about 73 miles long, and it's basically the British version of the Great Wall of China. The wall was built during a time when Britain was the furthest frontier from the imperial powers of Rome, and was constructed by Emperor Hadrian in 122 AD. And even today, we're still uncovering its secrets. Here's where the mysterious bodies come into play. Archaeologists discovered a set of rather impressive ruins during the 20th century, very near to a fort where ancient Roman soldiers and generals had lived in an encampment. The ruins included several different buildings, one of which was an old tavern. Underneath the tavern, where the floorboards once were, archaeologists found the body of a man and a woman, and the man was found with a dagger stabbed into his back. The place has since been dubbed the Murder House, and to this day, nobody knows anything about these ancient bodies, other than that they appeared to have been buried beneath the floorboards. Number 6. The Holy Grail. The quest for the Holy Grail is one of the most notorious biblical adventures of all time. The quest for the Holy Grail is kind of like the hunt for Noah's Ark, or for the sacred Ark of the Covenant. It's something that many people believe in, but that nobody really knows the answers to. But just a few years ago, a medieval history lecturer named Margarita Torres and an art historian named Jose Miguel Ortega claimed that they found the Holy Grail resting inside the Basilica of San Isidoro in the Spanish city of Leon. This discovery was reached after years of investigation and a lifetime of historical studies. A rather special Egyptian parchment was uncovered that mentioned that the Holy Chalice of Jesus Christ had been taken from Jerusalem and delivered to Cairo, then given to a ruler of the Islamic kingdom on the Mediterranean coast, with all of these clues eventually pointing them to the Basilica in Leon. Of course, if you're not actually sure exactly what the Holy Grail is, legend states that it's the hallowed cup which Jesus Christ drank from during the Last Supper, and the same cup that was used to collect his very precious blood. Researchers believe that the cup is currently known as the Chalice of the Infanta Donna Eurica, a goblet encrusted with jewels made from gold and onyx and embedded with many precious stones. According to the History Channel, scientific dating has already placed the origins of the cup at somewhere between 200 BC and 100 AD. However, the unexplainable thing about this is that there's no concrete way of confirming whether this truly was the goblet used by Jesus Christ, or if all the clues just make for one great big coincidence. Number 5. The Assyrian Nimrod lens. The Nimrod lens dates back 3,000 years. It's an ancient piece of rock crystal, first unearthed back in 1850 at the Assyrian palace of Nimrud, located in modern Iraq. However, ever since its discovery, scientists and historians alike have been in a hot debate over what exactly the piece of rock crystal was used for. Many claim that the lens was utilized by the Assyrians as part of one of their first telescopes in the world, which might actually explain why ancient cultures like the Assyrians knew as much as they did about astrology. The artifact has been dated from between 750 and 710 BC. It's oval-shaped, and it does look like it could have fit inside of some kind of telescopic funnel and used as a lens. Initial tests have shown that the focal point of the rock crystal gives it an equivalent of 3x magnifying power, and if combined with another lens could achieve even better magnification. This definitely would have allowed the ancient Assyrians to view the stars in startling clarity. But of course, there are also the naysayers. Some claim that there's no evidence it was ever used as part of a telescope, even going so far as to say that it was probably just a piece of glass used to start fires by concentrating the rays of the sun. Even the British Museum claimed that there is absolutely no evidence at all for this artifact being a lens, and that it was probably just a piece of furniture. As you can see, the scientific world is definitely not in agreement on this one. Number 4. The leaking core. A new study just found that the innermost part of our planet is spilling some of its very important contents into the mantle, which eventually makes its way to the surface. Now, this may seem scary at first. It almost seems as if the liquid magma core of our Earth is slowly trickling outwards, and it kinda is. But it's been happening for so long that scientists believe we really don't need to be that worried. According to new scientific evidence, the Earth's core has been leaking for the past 2.5 billion years. And no one knows why. The way the discovery was made is incredibly complicated. It involves the metal tungsten and element number 74 on our periodic table. The core of the Earth is made mostly out of iron and nickel, and there's a lot of tungsten hanging out there as well. Researchers were able to detect huge amounts of tungsten inside of rocks that have oozed out from the mantle to the surface of the Earth. And by doing a bunch of science and math, they figured out that the oldest mantle rocks on the planet have almost no tungsten isotopes, whereas newer rocks, starting around 2.5 billion years ago, have increased levels of it. If you're confused, don't worry, so am I. The basic thing you need to know is that elements from the Earth's core have slowly been making their way to the surface, but whether this is an issue that will end up destroying the planet or not is yet to be seen, because researchers don't know why or how it's happening. Number 3. BADA Valley Megaliths. The BADA Valley megaliths in Indonesia are some of the most mysterious and misunderstood archaeological structures in the world. In fact, the megaliths located inside the Lore Lindu National Park have yet to even be formally documented and cataloged, even though there are several hundred of these strange statues found all throughout the area. These megaliths were first discovered back in 1908, and even 100 years later we're still sitting in the dark about what exactly they mean. There have been speculations that claim the statues were carved 5,000 years ago, while other estimates place them at being only 1,000 years old. Some people even relate them to the lost cultures of Laos and Cambodia that allegedly carved similar giant megaliths thousands of years before today. The big mystery here is that we don't know who carved these stone statues. One of the most confusing parts about the mystery is that the statues are very different from every other type of megalith or statue found throughout Southeast Asia. This suggests that the BADA Valley megaliths were crafted by a completely different culture that had nothing to do with the ancient kingdoms of Thailand, Indonesia, or the Khmer. But of course, we simply don't have enough information to even put forth a realistic theory. Number 2. Judaculla Rock. Judaculla Rock in Northern Carolina is a strange boulder carved with mysterious petroglyphs. It's located in the mountains in the western part of the state, and it's generally agreed that the rock dates back to around 2000 BC. Before the colonization of North America by the Europeans, the Judaculla Rock was a sacred site used by the Cherokee Indians. They believed that a giant creature landed on the rock while jumping between mountains, which is why it looks as though there's a handprint in the center of the boulder with 7 fingers. There are also stories that claim ghosts can be heard screaming around the rock at night, though this is all speculation and rumor. As for the petroglyphs on the rock, scientists can't really agree on what they represent. The rock has eroded way too much to properly identify the markings. But then there's the imprint of the 7-fingered hand, which absolutely nobody can even begin to speculate on. Number 1. Keeping your bike upright. Believe it or not, the science of how your bicycle stays upright is a huge mystery that nobody seems to be able to solve. The general assumption was that the gyroscopic forces induced when the wheels spin make the bike stable and upright in conjunction with the fork trail, which means that the steering axis will always follow the direction of the wheels. However, a team of engineers have recently proved that a bicycle can stay upright even without the gyroscopic forces or the fork trail. Jim Papadopoulos, working with an international team of engineers, used counter-rotating wheels to cancel the gyroscopic effect of a bike, thereby eliminating any stabilizing effect. The results of their testing showed that something other than gyroscopic forces and fork trail keep the bike upright while it's in motion. The issue is that they don't have a clue what exactly that force could be. It might have something to do with the center of mass, but the truth is that scientists are now saying that there could be an unknown missing ingredient to the stabilization of a bike. And when this secret ingredient is discovered, it could lead to a revolution in two-wheeled transport. A fisherman in Serbia hooked a bizarre-looking sea creature while fishing in the Zavol Lake. It wasn't exactly a fish, and it definitely wasn't a sea snake. It seemed more like a worm than anything else. But the confused fisherman had absolutely no idea what his strange catch actually was, or even what to call it. It resembled a thin piece of black string or a bootlace. He shared a clip on social media of the alien-like monster wriggling around on some rocks after he dropped it, and it went viral. The wiry, dark-colored creature moved in a distinct snapping motion. The thing didn't even look real, and certainly not like it should be alive. It later turned out that what the fisherman had hooked was actually something called a nematomorpha, or a horsehair worm. These things are actually only a couple inches in length, but can reach up to 6 feet long in extreme cases, this being one of those cases. They feed on beetles and cockroaches and typically hang out in damp areas like swimming pools and the occasional stream. But it's quite rare for one to be caught by a fisherman. Number 9. Man-eating cod. Workers at an Australian fish factory were shocked beyond words when they discovered a severed human head inside of a cod. After the 5.5-foot and 97-pound fish was caught and brought into the factory, its belly was sliced open as part of normal procedures. However, when the large fish had its belly opened, to everyone's horror, an adult man's head rolled out onto the table. The man still had his features. There was still hair on his head, and his face seemed to be frozen in a scream. Yeah, no kidding. According to the co-owner of the fish factory, everyone was in total disbelief. When the workers found it, they quickly called the police, who thought it was just a prank at first. After all, it's not every day that a cod bites a man's head off. Of course, it wasn't actually the fish that killed the man. That would be one tough cod, considering they don't have sharp teeth and usually suck their prey into their mouths. Instead, police suggested that the unfortunate man had already been dead when the cod swam by, saw something meaty, and opened its mouth to eat. The head ended up belonging to a man named Michael Edwards, who went missing after falling overboard in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's possible that the man drowned. Something big and hungry like a shark or a crocodile got hold of his body, and then his head floated away and the cod swam by and ate it. One of the people working at the factory said, "It's amazing what you find in fish sometimes, but we've never seen anything as horrific as this." Number 8. Deep sea monster. An extremely strange-looking deep-sea fish has recently been caught in India, and it looks like something that would haunt your nightmares. This fish is believed to be a rhinochimera, a type of cartilaginous fish that is part of the chimera family. They're also known as long-nosed chimeras, primarily because of their exceptionally long snouts. These types of fish are quite elusive and live in the deep depths of the vast ocean, normally below 4,000 feet. Though they have been spotted even deeper than 6,000 feet. This particular fish was caught 40 nautical miles off the coast of India, though exactly what species it was could not be identified without proper study. These fish are so rarely caught that fishermen and even scientists don't really know that much about them, but believe they're starting to migrate from the deep sea. So far, there are at least 3 known species. They can be found in tropical seas worldwide, and they grow to be over 4 feet in length. So have you ever seen a chimera? If you have, what did you think? Ugly or fascinating? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 7. Three-legged freak. A fisherman doing his thing near Coney Island was left very surprised and a little puzzled after he caught a 3-legged creature out of the Atlantic Ocean. The strange monster hooked on the end of his fishing line appeared to have 3 tentacle-like legs, a huge and bulbous head, slits for gills, and nobody had any clue what it was. The guy even captured footage of this bizarre octopus-like monster flopping around on the deck of his fishing boat. In the video he posted online, you can clearly tell how weirded out he was when you hear him saying things like, "What the hell is that?" with his mother in the background saying the exact same thing. Some claim the creature was a clear-nosed skate, which according to the Florida Museum is a diamond-shaped animal with a triangular snout and dark spots all over its body. These weird creatures live in the northwestern Atlantic, and they migrate towards the shore every year. The skate is completely harmless, and they're often caught by accident by recreational fishermen. It might look like it has 3 legs, but that's because it becomes oddly shaped when taken out of the water. When these creatures are in the water where they belong, they almost look like stingrays with flat bodies and long tails. Number 6. The Russian water horrors. A Russian fisherman named Roman Fedortsov spent his days on a fishing trawler doing incredible deep-sea dives. This guy spent so much time out on the ocean that he's managed to catch a bunch of terrifying sea monsters that definitely look like they belong in a sci-fi movie. He recently took to Instagram and Twitter, where he unleashed a gallery of the most spine-chilling creatures living in the world's oceans. Sometimes Roman himself recognizes the creatures that he captures, but more often than not, they're a complete mystery. Some of the horrifying things he's pulled into his boat look like animals created by Frankenstein himself. He's caught freaky black fish with long piranha-like teeth, giant yellow sea spiders, and even an unidentified fish that looks like a monster from the Alien movies. Number 5. Big-eyed dino fish. An angler recently caught a dinosaur-like fish with the biggest eyes you've ever seen on a sea creature. This happened in Norway, when the young fisherman reeled in a strange animal that had large circular eyes that made it look like an alien from another planet. The eyes took up almost its entire head, with the rest of it being a long and slimy tail. The 19-year-old nearly jumped out of his boat when he saw what he'd caught. And this says a lot considering that the kid worked as a local fishing guide for Nordic sea angling. He was fishing in the same area all the time and had never seen such an abominable beast. And he was used to catching some really strange fish. Plus, he was only fishing at about 2,600 feet below the surface when he caught the thing. He had in fact been looking for blue halibut, which itself is a rare species only 5 miles from the shore. It took him about 30 minutes to reel the fish in, and it definitely wasn't a blue halibut. But we did figure out the identity for this fish. It was actually a ratfish, which according to the New York Post is a distant relative of the shark that can be traced back 300 million years. They live in the deepest expanses of the ocean and are almost never caught. Number 4. The blob monster. A commercial fisherman from Sydney pulled a bizarre blobfish out of the water and nearly had a heart attack. This is one of the strangest and ugliest catches ever, seeing as the fish had a translucent body and seemed to be oozing some kind of blue ink. The creature looked like it was melting, almost like a silicone prop from a movie that had been stuffed into the microwave. After catching this freak of nature, the commercial fisherman posted a picture of it on the internet, hoping that someone could properly identify it. Some people immediately commented that the fish looked like their sister or the mother of their ex, but that's of course ridiculous. It did take a while, but somebody finally identified the fish as being a ghostly sea devil, something that's usually found in tropical parts of the ocean at depths of almost 7,000 feet. If you know anything about the depths of the ocean, you know that when something is pulled 7,000 feet up, there's a serious change in pressure, which is definitely why the fish looked so melted. It was basically crushed under the change in pressure, like someone turned its gravity up to 100. Number 3. Mammoth catfish. A mammoth catfish was recently caught in Italy, and it's so massive that if there weren't pictures, you probably wouldn't believe it. The Associated Press reported that an Italian fisherman named Dino Ferrari caught what was almost a world record for the biggest Wells catfish ever. The massive catfish was 8.7 feet in length and weighed an impossible 280 pounds. It almost beat the record, as the biggest Wells catfish ever caught was only slightly above 300 pounds. The truly incredible part is that Ferrari hooked the fish while using nothing but a sport fishing rod and reel. It's hard to believe that such a small hook could pull such a giant monster out of the water, but he did it. The Wells catfish is considered to be one of the largest catfish in the entire world. They're native to Europe and they typically live in large warm lakes. They spend most of their time hiding in holes in the riverbed or inside of sunken trees. These fish are bottom feeders, slurping up whatever they can find at the bottom of the ocean and sometimes even hunting frogs or rats. Number 2. Albino fish monster. Another alien fish monster was recently caught, and this time off the coast of Cabo in Mexico. It was so strange that at first nobody could identify it. It had a fat belly, a head kinda like a shark, and its skin was completely white. According to Jamie Rendon, the guy who actually caught the fish, it had extremely strange eyes, so strange that they caught him completely off guard. And here's the best part of this weird catch. Jamie immediately realized he had probably caught some kind of endangered creature, so he took a quick picture and then threw the fish back into the water so it could swim down to wherever it came from. And after that, it was just a matter of posting the picture online to try and figure out what kind of weird fish it was. After a lot of investigating, it turned out that Jamie had caught a swell shark. These types of sharks are actually pretty common. The reason this one looked so freaky is because it must have been an albino. Swell sharks are usually yellow or brown in color with lots of dark splotches, but this one was pure white and very obviously sunburned. It either lacked some or all of its pigmentation, meaning Jamie had unwittingly hooked one of the rarest albino animals in the world, one that will probably never be seen again by human eyes. Number 1. The eyeless fish. Not too long ago, a couple of Thai fishermen were left speechless after they hooked what could only be described as the scariest sea creature ever pulled out of the ocean. It must have been living deep in the waters off the coast of Thailand because neither of the fishermen had ever seen such an abomination in their lives. The fish they caught was completely white, except for its red and mutated flippers and its dark red lips. It had a huge gaping mouth and strange white teeth pointing in all directions. And perhaps the weirdest feature of all was that the fish had no eyes to see with. It flopped around on the floor of their boat totally eyeless, but with enough energy to bite a man's foot off. To this day, it's not clear what species of fish it was. Many experts claim that it looked like a cross between a few different species. It almost looked like an eel, but it definitely wasn't. The truth is, we haven't explored enough of the deep ocean yet to identify this particular monster. We may never see another one of these eyeless fish again. High up in the Himalayas, there are hundreds of skeletons scattered around an ancient site that have been boggling scientists ever since they were first discovered. It's known as Skeleton Lake and it's located in India. Researchers suspect there are at least 500 human remains located inside the lake and scattered around the nearby area. And so far, not a single skeleton has been found perfectly intact. They're all in fragments. So far as the story goes, a forest ranger stumbled upon the skeletons here during World War II. And ever since then, people have been arguing about why there are so many bodies and why the lake was once such a significant burial ground. One theory was that a large traveling party had been caught in a lethal hailstorm sometime in the 9th century, causing them all to die at the lake. But this theory proved to be bunk. An international team of archaeologists and geneticists got a hold of 37 individual bone remains from the lake and found that the majority of skeletons date back 1,000 years. However, others died there in the 1800s. The time frame is extremely confusing, and to make matters even more confusing, David Reich, a geneticist with Harvard University, discovered that the genetic makeup of the skeletons is extremely diverse, consisting of South Asian and even Mediterranean heritage. This suggests that people from all over the world were drawn to this ancient lake in the Himalayas over 1,000 years ago to die. And to this day, nobody knows why. Number 9. Curious human skull. Climbers exploring California's second highest mountain peak on Mount Williamson discovered a rather grisly surprise buried in the boulder field. They came upon what looked to be a bone, and when they inspected the object closer, they found a fractured human skull. After clearing away some of the boulders, it turned out that the skull was part of a full skeleton, one that had been up in the mountains for so long that all that remained were the bones, a pair of shoes, and a belt. And this turned into an enormous mystery. There were no missing persons cases in the area that were unsolved. Nobody was reported injured or dead, and according to the Inyo County Sheriff's Department, there are currently no answers as to who the body belonged to or what happened to them. A spokesman even said that the body showed no evidence of foul play. But what's really interesting is that the body was found a little off the trail. It was not in a heavily explored area, and so the person may have been hiking off the beaten path when some kind of disaster struck. The skeleton was so old and so decayed that its identity will probably never be discovered. Number 8. The alien skull. A mysterious skull with enormous eye sockets and teeth like fangs has left scientists stunned, with some people believing that the skull belonged to an alien. The skull has been described as 50% larger than a standard human skull, and it was originally found by Danish contractors who were working to replace old sewage pipes on Sealand Island. The pipes they were digging out were over 100 years old, and underneath the foundations of the building, which was once part of a butcher shop, they found the supposed alien skull. The skull was apparently examined by experts from a veterinarian hospital in Copenhagen, and they said that although the skull definitely resembled a mammal, its main features made it impossible to properly identify. Scientists are now saying that the skull has absolutely no link to any species currently known on Earth. But to make matters even more mysterious, carbon dating of the skull placed it at 800 years old. So nobody's quite sure how it managed to get caught up in some old pipes that were only 100 years old. It's a huge mystery and one that may never be solved. According to Express News, there were a few other artifacts found with the skull, such as animal bones and stone axes, but none of them could be linked to the skull itself. Either this thing truly was left behind by alien visitors, or it's one of the most elaborate hoaxes in recent history. So what do you think of this alien skull? Do you think it's evidence of aliens on Earth? Or could it be from a genetic abnormality hundreds of years ago? Tell me your opinions in the comments below, and then remember to subscribe to World List if you haven't already for more amazing content. Number 7. Mysterious Cave Skeleton. The mysterious skeleton of a woman was just found inside of a flooded cave in Mexico, and it's unlike other skeletons found in America from around the same time period. 2 explorers dove into the submerged cave system near Tulum on the Yucatan Peninsula, and that was when they discovered the bones of the woman who was probably around 30 years old when she died roughly 10,000 years ago. The skeleton has been dubbed Chan Hole 3 by the German researchers studying her. Apparently, this woman had some notable features that separate her from other skeletons found in Mexico that also lived 10,000 years ago. The researchers compared her skull to 452 other skulls from across the Americas, and they found that she had broad cheekbones and a flat forehead, which is quite different from the other groups at the time who had slightly longer and narrower features. She also had strange cavities inside of her teeth, which suggested she had a diet that included far more sugar than other indigenous groups in the area. This information might be a little confusing, but the main thing you need to know is that because of all the differences found with the woman's mysterious skeleton, researchers have been able to confirm that 10,000 years ago in Mexico, there were already many different types of ethnic groups and cultures with different morphological traits. To put it simply, 10,000 years ago in the Americas, people were already very diverse. Number 6. Strange Elephant Skeleton. Not all the strangest skeletons ever discovered belong solely to humans. A very bizarre elephant skeleton found in India has brought to light some ancient secrets of an old temple structure. The skeleton of the elephant, along with its chain and other wooden artifacts, were found inside the basement of Thurai Evim Kurma Adiva Temple during a restoration project. Some of the artifacts include Chinese pots and lamps, and the table itself has a history that goes back 1,000 years. But the elephant bones are not that old. Radiocarbon dating revealed the elephant lived about 2 centuries ago, and that coincides with a local story of a legendary elephant being cremated just outside of the temple. What likely happened was that the strange elephant was partially cremated, and then its ashes and bones and pieces of its chain ended up inside the vault of the temple, buried under 5 feet of dirt and vegetative growth. But the mystery here is that nobody knows why the elephant was important enough to be cremated and buried inside of this ancient temple. Historians are still working to uncover the full history of the temple itself, and the recently discovered elephant bones are just another weird piece of this puzzle. Number 5. The Medieval Giantess. The shocking skeleton of a medieval giantess was recently discovered by archaeologists working with the Museum of First Piast in Poland. The remains of this freakish woman were found outside of a medieval church. Preliminary analysis of her huge skeleton determined that she grew to an outstanding height of 7 feet and 2 inches, taller than just about any woman anywhere in history. However, even though this medieval giant was undoubtedly huge and imposing, she apparently lived a brief life full of disease and misery. The giantess was buried in a cemetery used for only the most elite people in the area. In fact, almost everyone buried in the cemetery was wealthy or otherwise connected to the Polish King Boleslaw the Brave, who ruled the earliest part of the 11th century. But after the 11th century was over, more and more commoners began to infiltrate the previously wealthy graveyard. And so far, researchers have found over 2,500 skeletons here. They don't know if the giantess was part of the elite or just a lonely commoner. This mysterious woman had normally proportioned bones. Her bones just so happened to be giant. And this means that she probably suffered from giantism, the crippling debilitation that happens when a person's pituitary gland overproduces growth hormones, causing them to grow to an unbelievable 9 feet in height. Unfortunately, there's no written history about this woman, so we don't know what exactly she did in her life. We don't know if she was maybe a medieval warrior or just part of a local circus. Number 4. Elongated Peruvian skulls. In South America 700 years ago, the ruling elite did something that nobody on Earth would even consider today. They elongated their skulls to look like freakish aliens. These people would purposely extend their heads as part of a status symbol, kind of like how a rich person might put on a gold watch. But of course, elongating a person's skull would be considerably more painful than strapping on a watch. This was done by a small ethnic community that existed 300 years before the Incan Empire, known as the Calagua. These guys lived in the Colca Valley, where they raised and bred alpacas and llamas, and where they also used 2 pieces of wood to squish the heads of an infant forcing their skull to grow upward instead of forming naturally. The practice was ultimately banned by the Spanish invaders in the 16th century, and it hasn't really been seen since. However, many of these ancient skulls have been discovered in Peru. According to a report from The Independent, there have been roughly 200 elongated skulls found throughout the Colca Valley, spanning a period of about 300 years. So we're not really going to get into any individual discoveries here, but we can talk about the research that Mr. Velasco published in the journal Current Anthropology after studying a wide variety of elongated skulls left behind by the Calagua people. Using chemical analysis, researchers were able to figure out that women who had mutated heads ate a broader diet than those with normal skulls. The team also found that the women with modified skulls suffered fewer injuries than those without, reinforcing the idea that those with elongated heads were at the top of the societal hierarchy. Number 3. The winged skeleton. The preserved remains of what can only be described as a literal fairy were apparently discovered in the basement of an old house in London, England. According to a report from the Mirror, the gruesome skeleton was part of a larger collection that belonged to somebody named Thomas Theodore Maryland, with the rest of the collection consisting of werewolf specimens, alien bones, and other unbelievable artifacts, all of which were apparently collected and stored inside of a mansion owned by a mysterious collector who lived there in the late 19th century. This is something straight out of Van Helsing, and it's obviously not real. The macabre collection of mythical beasts in cases and jars, including the small fairy skeleton and sketches of the victims of Jack the Ripper, are all part of an artistic narrative describing what mythical monsters and fairy tale beasts might have actually looked like in the physical world. The little skeleton fairy may not be real, but it's a very cool thing to consider. And it's also kind of fun to wonder what the world might have looked like had these things truly existed in our ancient past. Number 2. The oldest skull ever. The oldest complete skull of a human ancestor was found a few years ago by a goat herder in the Afar region of Ethiopia, long considered to be the cradle of human evolution. As unbelievable as this sounds, it's 100% true. This was one of the most reported archaeological stories in recent memory. The rare skull is all that remained of an ancient hominin with a brain roughly equal to that of a chimpanzee's. This ancient hominin lived in Africa 3.8 million years ago, and the discovery of the ancient relic has filled a critical gap in the line of human evolution. I mean, just to be clear, I'm not calling this skull part of the missing link, but some researchers are saying just that. The gap in the fossil record from between 3.6 to 3.9 million years ago has now been filled with this curious species. Researchers were able to use micro-CT scans and three-dimensional reconstructions to replace some of the missing features from the skull and put together a realistic image of what a human ancestor looked like almost 4 million years ago. And to be frank, we kind of looked like monkeys. We had tiny brains, flattened noses, and a whole lot of shaggy back hair. Number 1. Rare whale skeleton. Recently, researchers in Thailand found the partially fossilized skeleton of a bride's whale near Bangkok that's believed to be about 5,000 years old. But what makes this skeleton so cool is that it was discovered by an ordinary cyclist who spotted the 41-foot skeleton just sticking out of the ground. After the initial discovery, archaeologists descended on the scene to investigate and soon had a full 90% of the whale's skeleton revealed. According to a local geologist, it's insanely rare to find a whale skeleton in such great condition, especially on land, particularly in the middle of a city. If you're not sure what a bride's whale is, well, you're not alone. These are unique whales that prefer warmer waters, specifically in coastal parts of the Indian Ocean and the Gulf of Thailand. Scientists are hoping that once this basically perfect skeleton is studied further, it will reveal more about the mysterious geological conditions 5,000 years ago, as well as how to better help the bride's whales still alive today. So, what do you think about the elongated Peruvian skulls? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and then check in soon for another great video.